In this video, we're going to build a CRUD API in lightning speed. I was inspired by a video from CJ at Coding Garden. In his video, he builds a backend CRUD API using Node.js, Express, and MongoDB in 20 minutes. He did an amazing job, but I think I can do it a little bit faster. I'm going to use MongoDB Atlas and a new service that I discovered called PrestoAPI. PrestoAPI makes building a CRUD API super simple. All you do is connect your database and then define your endpoints. And to make it even better, it's completely free. You get one user, one database connection, one project, and 10 endpoints. It's great for small projects or development. But if you sign up with the promo code CODESTACKER2, you get 2 months of the Pro plan for free. Plus, if you build a project using PrestoAPI, tweet the link to the project and tag myself, CodeStacker, and PrestoAPI for a chance to win some awesome swag. PrestoAPI will choose 5 random winners and announce them in 2 weeks. So let's see how fast we can build this CRUD API. First, let's set up our MongoDB. So I'll have Mongo open here, and I'm going to add a new project. We'll name this PrestoAPI Demo. And we'll just leave this at the default and create the project. Now we'll build our cluster. And we're going to use a free cluster. We'll use all of the defaults here and create cluster. And now it says your cluster is being created. And this could take between 1 and 3 minutes, it says. While it's doing that, we're going to add a database user. So I'm going to go to database access and then add a new database user. And we're going to leave it at the password authentication method. I'm going to name this CodeStacker. And then I'm going to auto-generate a secure password. And then I'll copy this. We'll need that in a little bit. And for the privileges, we'll leave it at read and write. Add that. And now we have our user. Let's go back to our clusters and see it's still creating. So it's going to take a little bit longer. Next thing, let's go to our network access. And we're going to allow access from anywhere. And then we'll confirm. Let's go back and check on our cluster. And it's still creating. All right, looks like our cluster is ready. Now let's go to collections. And we need to add data. You could add your own data, but we're just going to load some sample data. And the data is still loading. And it looks like we have our sample data. So we have this sample Airbnb, analytics, Mflix, which is a bunch of movies, restaurants, several different data sets that we can use in testing. So let's go back up to our project, and it looks like we're ready to go. So now we can connect, and we can choose how we're going to connect and get our connection string. And so we're going to use some of this in our connection to PrestoAPI. So now let's go over to PrestoAPI. So first we need to connect to a database. I'm going to name this rental agency. And then for our driver, we can choose from SQL Server, MySQL, MongoDB, PostgreSQL, and Oracle. These are the databases that PrestoAPI can connect to. So we're going to choose MongoDB. And then for the server, let's go back to Atlas. In this connection string, here is our server. So it's cluster, all of this .NET. So we'll copy that, come over here and paste that. For our user, remember we set that up already. So that was CodeStacker. And then our password, I'll copy and paste that in. And then the database name. So if we go back to Atlas and then go to our collections, and we see this sample underscore Airbnb, and that's what we're going to use. So we'll go back here, sample underscore Airbnb, and then let's test this. So you're going to see that this is actually going to time out. So let's go back to Mongo and then to our cluster, and then let's go to connect, and let's look at our connection string again. In this connection string, it starts with MongoDB plus SRV. We go back to Presto, we'll see that this actually timed out. So let's look at our connection string. At the beginning of this connection string, it says MongoDB, and then it doesn't have that plus SRV. So let's add that, and then let's test it. And we get connection successful. So we have a proper connection string now, and let's submit it. And it connected to our database. Go back to our dashboard. The next thing that we need to do is create a project. So let's do that. And we'll just name this rental agency, connecting to the rental agency database. And then prefix, we get to choose something.prestoapi.com. So let's say rentals.prestoapi.com. So the next step here is to create your first endpoint. So let's do that. I'm going to name this rentals. And the database that we're using is our rental agency. And what kind of component type do we want to use? So we'll use table. And let's select the table that we want to use. And this database only contains one table. So that's listings and reviews. So we'll connect to that. The unique ID is the ID. And then we can choose what methods we want. By default, it's all get, post, put, delete. And we'll just leave it at that. For our get requests, we can customize which columns we want to get. By default, it's all. We can define a custom query, and we could add query parameters. So if we only wanted rentals from a specific city, we could add that in here. And then for our post, we have some settings as well. We can choose the columns. We can add a custom query. Same for the put request. And then for the delete request as well. Let's go ahead and leave everything at default, and we'll hit submit. And now we have our get, which will get all rentals. Then we have a get with an ID, so that will get a single rental. And then we have our post, which will add a new rental to the database. We have put and our delete. All right, so if we copy this, let's go over to Insomnia. And in Insomnia, we can paste that. Now, if I were to use this as is, it would pull all of the rentals, all of the information, and that might take a while, and it might also cause Insomnia to lock up. So we're going to say !limit, and I want to limit these to just the first 10. All right, so let's send. And now we have our first 10 items. So if we look at one of these, we can see that we're getting an ID, a listing URL, name, summary, space, description, a lot of information here. So it's working. So technically, we could say that I've actually finished creating the CRUD API. And that took me about 9 minutes. So let's go ahead and create a simple front end to do something with this data. We'll make a very crude Airbnb clone. So let's open up VS Code. I've got a blank folder open here, and let's just create a few files. So we'll say index.html. We'll also create a style.css and a main.js. All right, let's close that sidebar. And then in our HTML, we'll just use Emmet to create a boilerplate. And we'll say Presto API demo for the title and the body. Let's add a div with class of container. Inside that, we'll have an H1, and we'll say rentals. After that, let's have a div with the class of rentals. And that's where we'll put all of the rentals. And we're going to do that through JavaScript. So lastly, let's go up here and let's add our CSS. And let's also add our JavaScript. And that was main.js. And let's be sure to defer that. All right, and we'll save that. And we'll do the styles last. Let's go to our JavaScript next. So we're going to create an asynchronous function. We're going to use fetch to get our data, and we're going to use async await to do that. Async function, we'll say get rentals. And then we'll say const rental fetch equals await fetch. And then let me get that URL. So we're going to use that same one. rentals.prestoapi.com/API rentals, and then !limit 10. All right, and then we'll create another const. We'll say rental JSON is going to equal await rental fetch.json. And then for now, let's just console log this rental JSON. And of course, we're going to need to run this function. So we'll say get rentals. And then let's open this up in live server. And we'll open our console. And we see we have an array here. And we have all of our rentals and all of that information. Nice. Let's go back to VS Code. I'll just comment that out. And then next, let's say we need to get our rentals element. So that's document.querySelector. And then we called it rentals. And then we're going to create some HTML, right? So we're going to put that into that element. So we'll say let HTML equal, and we'll start out blank. And then we're going to loop through that JSON information. So we'll say rental JSON dot for each. And then we'll say that element is going to be called rental. So this was each rental that we're looping through. So now we need to get all of the information out of each rental. So let's go back to our console in our browser. And there's certain things that we're going to pull out of here. So accommodates. So how many people, how many guests does it accommodate? We're going to get that. Amenities. We're going to get the first few of these amenities to list. Bedrooms, bed type, bathrooms, beds, the name, number of reviews, the price, property type, review scores. We're going to pull out this review score value. All right, so let's go back into VS Code. All right, so let's get all of the data that we need. So we'll say const image equals rental.images.picture underscore URL. We're also going to need our room type. So that's going to be rental.roomType. And then name is going to be rental room name. Guests will be rental.accommodates. And then bedrooms, rental bedrooms. Beds will be rental beds. Baths is rental.bathrooms. We have amenities, which is going to equal rental.amenities. And then we're going to, this is an array, so we're going to just take the first three. So we'll say slice 0, 3, and then we're going to join them with this dot. And then we have our stars, so it's the ratings. So that's rental.review scores. .review scores value. And the review scores are 0 to 10 range, and I want to convert that to a 0 to 5 range. So we're just going to divide it by 2. But then another issue is that some of them don't have any reviews at all, so it's going to come back as NaN or not a number. So what we'll do is we'll say if there is a review score, we're going to use a ternary operator here. Then we'll say %. And let's just grab this whole thing here. So we're going to % if it is there and divide by 2. If it's not there, then we're just going to say 0. All right, the next thing we'll need is reviewers. So how many reviews were there? So rental.number of reviews. All right, and the last thing is going to be the price. So that is rental.price. So now let's structure our HTML. So we're going to say HTML. We're going to add to it, so plus equals, and then we're going to use template literal. All right, instead of typing all of this out here, we're actually going to type it in HTML, which is going to make it a lot faster to type. So within rentals, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a div with the class of card, Within that, we'll have an image with the class of card image. All right, after that, we'll have a div with the class of card details. Within the card details, we'll have a div with the class of card subtitle. After the subtitle, we'll have a div with the class of card title. And after the title, we'll have a small with the class of card rooms. And we'll have another small after that with the class of card amenities. All right, after that, we'll have a div with the class of card bottom. Within that, we'll have a div with the class of card stars. And after that one, a class of card price. Okay, so this is the basic structure that we're going to duplicate for each rental. So let's take this and we'll move it over to our JavaScript and we'll just paste it right in here. And then let's just format it. Okay, so what we'll do on the image is we're going to pass in here within the template literal. We'll use $ curly braces, and then we can pass in our image, which is going to be this rental images picture URL, right? And then for the alt, we'll just say image for now. And now on our subtitle, we're going to pass in our variable of room type, and then the card title, and that's going to be name. And then card rooms is going to be our guest. So that's how many guests. We'll separate it with this dot, and we'll say bedrooms, beds, and baths. Now on these, I wanted to say the amount and then what it is. So if it's one guest, but what if there are multiple? So 2 guests. So the word itself is going to change from singular to plural. So in order to do that, we're going to change these. So guest, bedrooms, beds, and bath. We're going to change these to let instead of const because we're going to alter them. So let's just go right here and we'll say work out plurals. And so we'll say guest is going to equal guest greater than 1. So we're going to use a ternary operator. So if it's greater than 1, then we'll say guest guests, right? So it's going to say 2 guests. If it's not greater than 1, then it's going to say guest guest. All right, so let's just copy this down. And then the next one is going to be bedrooms. So let's just copy that. And we can change all of these. So bedrooms, if bedrooms is greater than 1, then bedrooms, bedrooms. Too many S's there. And if it is not greater than 1, then bedrooms, bedroom. All right, let's copy that down 2 more times. Next one is beds. So we'll change these. All right, so if beds is greater than 1, then it's going to be beds. If not, it's going to be bed. All right, and then the last one was bath. So we'll say if bath is greater than 1, then it's going to be baths. Otherwise, it will just be bath. Okay. And so now these updated variables are what is going to print here. All right, so let's go on to amenities, and that one's easy. That is just going to be amenities. And then in our stars, let's go there and we're going to use a short code for the star. So that's going to be ampersand star, semicolon, and then we want the actual star numbers. So we'll say stars. And then after that, in parentheses, we're going to say the amount of reviews that there were. So within that, we'll say reviews, reviewers. All right, and then lastly, our price. So we'll have $sign for the actual $sign, and then another $sign, and then curly braces, and we'll put inside of that our price. All right, and so now that's going to loop through each one. It's going to create this HTML for each one. So after our loop, which is going to be right here, we'll say rentals, which is our rentals element, and we'll say enter HTML, and that is going to equal our HTML. That should be it. Let's save that, and let's go over to our app, main.js 37. Oh, this one is misspelled. It should be bath. All right, let's go back. And there we go. No errors. And then we have each one, we have our image, and then we have all of our details. Now, obviously, this is not styled quite yet, but each one has all of the information that we're looking for. All right, so next let's look at styling it and make it look a little bit better. I'm going to close this and I'm going to position this off to the side here. All right, let's go over to our CSS. I'm just going to paste in a little bit of standard stuff here. I'm importing a Google font, Montserrat, and then we have, we're setting some global settings here, padding 0, margin 0, and box sizing border box. And then setting our font family to Montserrat and a color. So after that, let's go ahead and save that. We'll see a little bit of changes there. And then next, let's look at our container. So I'm going to set the margin on this to 0 top and bottom and auto left and right, because we're going to set a width of 80%. All right, now you'll see that it centers everything there. All right, next we're just going to add a little bit of margin to the H1. So margin is going to be 1 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. Add a little bit of space there at the top. Next, we'll look at the card. We're going to display these as flex. And then we're going to set a border on the bottom to 1 pixel solid, and then E2. And then a padding on the bottom of 1 rem and a margin on the bottom of 1 rem. All right, so now we have this little line here in between each one. All right, now we'll look at the card image. And we're going to set the width on these to 30%. And we're going to set a border radius of 1 rem. And there we go. So that's going to round the corners off a little bit. Since we have the card set up as flex, we have our image on the left, and then we have our details on the right. So let's work on the details now. So that was card details. And we're going to set the position on this to relative. We'll be absolutely positioning one of the other elements in a minute. We'll set a padding of 0 top and bottom and 1 rem left and right, and then a width of 100%. Save that. Now we have a little bit of padding. It's already starting to look pretty good. All right, let's go to the card subtitle. So that's going to be this first line here is card subtitle. And in here, we're going to set a font size of 0.9 rem. So just a little bit smaller than normal. And then a margin on the bottom of 0.25 rem. And the font weight, make it a little bit lighter of 300. All right, that's looking good. Next, we'll look at the title. So that was card title. On the card title, we'll set the font size to 1.1 rem, a little bit larger than normal. Font weight of 500. A line height of 1.5 rem. And margin on the bottom of 1 rem. All right, looking pretty good. Couple more left. Let's go to our card rooms and also the card amenities. In here, we'll set these to display as block. By default, they are inline. So now we'll make them on 2 lines. And then we're going to set a font size on these of 0.9 rem. Font weight will be 300. And margin on the bottom of 0.3 rem. Looking pretty good. Now we'll go to our bottom. So card bottom. So that's our stars and our price. So we're going to set this as position absolute. And then we'll set it absolutely to the bottom. We're going to display it as flex. So those 2 items within it will flex. And then we're going to set the justify content to space between. And we'll set the width to 90%. And there we go. Now it's looking a little bit odd because I'm not going to make this responsive, but if we get too small, it kind of overlaps. So we would have to put a little bit more work into it to make that responsive, but for now, this is pretty good. All right, just a couple more things here. Let's set some values on the stars. So card stars. And that's going to have a font size of 0.9 rem. And then our card price. We'll have a font size on this of 1.1 rem. All right, and then I want to highlight some of these as bold, and I'm actually going to do that here in our template. I'm actually going to, let's make this bigger so it's easier to see. I'm going to wrap the stars in a strong, and that will make it bold. And I'm going to do the same thing for the price. All right, let's save that. And that looks pretty good. Not bad for about 30 minutes. So that was just a very simple way to create a CRUD API without any backend experience. I hope that this video was helpful. Like this video to help me out and subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this.